Hello, and welcome to this conversation with the Black Management Forum. My name is Siobhan Henry, and we're here to join the president of the BMF, Mr. Mpho Motsei, as we commemorate 50 glorious years of the BMF's existence. Thank you for joining this conversation. We hope it's going to be one that excites you, not just about the BMF, but about the important strides that it's taken in 50 years and where it intends to take our country in the next 50 years. Welcome, President Motsei, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Siobhan.
And happy birthday to you.
Yay. We are celebrating a milestone, and we're very excited about it, that we're celebrating the 50th celebration of the BMF.
Did you think you would get here at 50 years, half a century?
Some of us were not even born when the BMF was formed. And I think for us is we're very grateful to what the forefathers have done, created this BMF and making sure that whatever contribution that I've made in the country can make such an impact. And I think for me is an aspect that as the BMF president, I was also able to fall into the hands of the 50th birthday. And I'm very grateful for that.
Oh, wonderful. Now, President, take us through the beginnings of this organization. It's reached its adulthood now.
Yep.
And this is, 50 years, if you're an individual, it's a big milestone in your life.
It is.
Because it marks a turning point when you look back at all the things you did, all the mistakes you made, all the successes, and then how you're going, the legacy you're going to build up over the next 50 years.
Yeah.
So talk us through, first of all, where this beautiful organization came from, how it originated, and in its starting, in its infancy, what it actually meant to Black people at that time.
It's a very exciting story, I think, when we're talking about the BMF and the origin of it. It started in 1976. And during that time, I think in the 70s, the reason why this organization was formed, when we hear from the forefathers, when they are telling us about this, was that they wanted to create a home for professionals. They wanted to create a place where they can be able to network. Remember, at that time, there was a law that no one, any other person who is Black can be a manager.
Mm-hmm.
And with that in mind, so they needed to be able to find a way that they can be able to ventilate their issues. They can be able to talk about the struggles and the pains that they are facing at their workplaces. And when they started this, really, to be honest, it was just an aspect of saying, let's come and meet as Black managers and Black professionals so we can be able to talk about the issues that are affecting us as Black people. And at the same time, for us to network about where the opportunities. So they will meet from different walks of life, different companies. And as they sit in there, they are talking about issues related to where's the opportunity here, where's the opportunity here. But also precisely for the purpose that they were talking about the issues of the country. They were planning the aspect of now as we are going towards the aspect of democracy and all that. So when the BMF was formed in the 70s, it was formed because of that. And I think as they were going towards the 80s, that's when this men and women who are professionals sat down and they were able to say to themselves, look, we need to be able to go to Lusaka to go talk to the ANC at the time. And they went and speak to the president of the ANC at the time to try to say to him, look, we are preparing for this as Black managers. We want to be able to hear where you are. And I think that was a turning point for the BMF because they wanted to be involved into politics, not as participating, but as just as a way of how to influence where the country is supposed to go at that particular time. So that period was a very exciting period because we were going towards the 1994. Which was a big milestone for us as we got the democracy. Now, the BMF at that time, it was formed precisely for that, to say we need to be able to have the interest of Black people, but not only the interest of Black people, but also the interests of the community and as well as South Africans at large. So they have that thing of saying, look, as we are getting into 1994, what should happen from here moving forward? Because yes, we have political power, or we are about to have the political power. But the question is one, is that are we going to be ready to be able to run the country?
Right.
Are we going to have the managers who are competent enough to take over from the whites who are running this country? Are we going to have the right people who are going to be able to sit in the SOEs, but also across corporate, who will be able to run this economy properly? Are we skilled enough that we can be able to run this country? And the BMF was very important as a catalyst to make sure that that happens. So in 1994,
Before we get to 1994, Mr. President, I just want to take you back to the origins of the BMF. Now, you talk about 1976, which is when BMF just started. It was a very dangerous time. You had the youth riots. You had a lot of pushback from the apartheid government at the time. There was no management roles, as you say. There was no opportunities for Black people to move into that space. But BMF was also occupying a really, really unique space because it was positioning itself as an apolitical, non-racial, non-sexist body that was trying to create training and development opportunities, leadership opportunities, to occupy the space that you foresaw that was going to happen in 1994, right? And at its time, it was carving out a niche that no one had ever carved out before. Tell us about that. Tell us about the vision that came with this ideal of the Black Management Forum.
So just to make you understand, especially when it comes to the leaders at the time when they meet, that they were meeting for the purpose of which is what you say, in that the managers and for them to craft, that was not the real reason. The reason for them they were meeting at that time, it was the frustrations that they were getting at work due to the apartheid and due to the laws that were prohibiting them to be able to also move corporate-wise and in the corporate ladder. And also there are laws that were preventing them to become managers. But it was just an aspect of them having a safe space for them to be able to confide at each other, but also talk about the challenges that they are facing at their workplace. So at that time when they met, they were meeting because of that reason. It was a home for them to say, as Black people, if we don't want to go to the Shebeen, where we can be able to talk about this and that, about which is what is happening after, maybe in the afternoon when we knocked off. So where can we meet? So that we can be able to talk and ventilate about the issues of the country, but also political issues that were happening at that particular time. So it was precisely because they wanted to have a home where they can be safe to ventilate their issues, but network amongst each other, because that is very key to what the BMF is all about. The networking part, it is the worth of the BMF, because that's where you find different people from different industries. Hence BMF, when it was inception, it was formed during that time. It was not industry-based, but it was for working guys to come and meet and say, what's happening at your workplace? What's happening in your workplace? How do you feel about what is happening? And that created the fire amongst them until they make the BMF to be structured. And they were even forced to say, but you need to have a name for this thing, because it needs to move from just you gathering at the Shebeen, moving from one house to another, or moving from one Shebeen to another, and drinking there, and you get drunk and you just say things that you're not even supposed to say. But where we are going to make this thing to be structured, give it a name. Hence, they had to come and say it needs to be Black, but also it needs to be management. So they were envisaging, remember at that time, as much as they say it needs to be management, they were not managers. They were not called managers. Yes. So they saw it to say, this is where we want to go. But it's about leadership. Hence, that gatherings, or those gatherings that they were having, created the BMF to now say, we need to make it structured. We need to understand what we stand for. And now they understood to say, we need to be able to stand for socio-economic transformation. That's what we need to stand for. because our people are struggling out there, especially those who are in corporate. Besides, we spend most of our time, if not 90% of our time at work than at home. Why are we not, as workers, can be able to gather so we can be able to talk? And initial meetings that they also had after the Shebins, where they decided to say, we're no longer going to meet there, they were also meeting in those very same corporates. So they will meet after hours in their own corporates so that they can be able to talk about the issues that are affecting the country and where do they want to take the country.
But that required a lot of discipline and a lot of foresight, because it didn't exist at the time. Like you're saying, Shebeen's was the main melting pot for intellectuals to come together and talk about politics or philosophy or whatever. And the other option was the halls of academia, which were very white and liberal. And Black Management Forum said, we don't want to associate with the Shebeens, nor do we want to associate with the white liberal ideology, which was not really as empowering as you would have wanted. And so BMF at the time said, we are going to create our own space, but we're also going to create an archetype, a sort of model of what we see Black people representing in the future, which was discipline. It was not getting drunk and being, valuing your development, your personal development, internalizing empowerment that would not only take the individual forward, but the collective forward. And that sounds like a very all-encompassing and a very advanced and sophisticated vision to have. Where did that come from?
So the reason why they were able to say now they need to create the BMF to become a thought leader, it was because now the BMF needed to come in as people who went to school, now to say we need to help the government that is now going to come. Now we need to be able to come up with ways on how to resolve the problems that we have in the country. Because you cannot be able to do that if you don't have people who are sitting in a room to have ideologies that are different and ideologies and a safe space for them to be able to think and to think harder as to how to resolve the problems at the time. So you needed that, and the BMF needed that. But of course, the other layer of the BMF, which happens to be the core of the BMF, is development. So out of those meetings, that's when they now started to realize we need to be able to have to develop our own people. Because now we are going towards the journey of democracy. And now it's becoming very clearer in terms of now we are about to get this political power. But for us to do that, you need to be able to have your people ready. They need to be prepared, they need to be skilled enough. They should be able to run these corporations, these big corporations, because we cannot talk about financial inclusion when we are not trained. And they say to you, here's the position, you can't be able to perform your work. So we needed, as the BMF at the time, to make sure that the issues related to development are in the center of it. So that's where this whole issue and movement of the BMF at the time was also thinking about. And the issue of taking over, the issue of development, the issue of who's going to be able to run the country and the economy of the country. And that was very crucial for us. Because remember at the time, even the laws that has to do with workers, it was the laws that was apartheid laws that were not really for Black people and disadvantaged people, but it was for the white people. So the BMF needed to now come and become a thought leader, think tank for the government that is now going to take over.
And I think, why I'm spending a bit of time on this is because I'd like people to appreciate how progressive this was for that time. Because I think at the time we were thinking either political party, trade union, or you just get a job, or you hang out in the Shebeen. And so BMF was navigating all of these different spaces. And it was saying, we don't want to do what's been done. We see a need. We see this mass of people Black people with enormous potential and energy to drive this country forward. And BMF at the time said, how do we create a home for them? And I think this really stands out as a really unique characteristic of the BMF, is creating a home for that potential. So can you speak to us about that, please?
Yeah, so remember at the time, there was a home for white people. There were organizations that were specifically formed for white people. But there was no organizations that were formed for black people, especially progressive people who are in corporate, who are workers, where they will say they've got a home, where they can ventilate their ideas without being judged, but without being prejudiced in the process. So they needed to create that, because that was making all black people in all walks of life and different industries that they find themselves to find BMF as a home, to say this is where we feel free, but this is where we can be able to ventilate our issues without being judged. And this is where we can be able to plan as to where do we want our country to go without us having issues of saying what's going to happen tomorrow for me if I'm ventilating my issues. This is where we can differ. You know, this is where we can come up with ways that can be able to drive the country forward. And that was very crucial, for them to be able to do that. So the issue about the BMF being formed at that time was really precisely for the aspect of black professionals meeting, to meet as regularly as possible. And when I'm talking to the founder about it, and the founder will be able to tell you, to say, when we met, we were really excited to meet, more than about the agenda that is on the paper. What are we going to be discussing? We'll be talking about all works of life issues. And that used to give us an opportunity for us to test certain ideas that we would want to test. And I think that is what the core of the BMF is about, even about its members, is to say we need to discuss about the aspect that has to do with the country, but talk about what is happening globally and all this other aspect. But it must be a safe space.
Yeah. And President, I think that's been really a defining trait of the Black Management Forum. It's always been democratic, it's always been inclusive. But I think what's fantastic is you haven't kept it so rigid and structured that members have to follow a certain, flow with the stream. The BMF member is a different kind of animal, isn't it? It's somebody that is allowed to be who they are. And to develop and to grow without the confines of a structure, which I think is a really, really beautiful trait to have in your organization. And now I'd like to bring us back to 1994, when a lot of organizations that had been developed in the 70s, like you point out, a lot of them had been co-opted, either by the government or by the corporate sector. But BMF always stayed true to its core value. Tell us more about how it actually managed to do that with the changing landscape.
Look, there was a time where the BMF was in the crossline, or in the crossroad, where they needed to ask themselves questions to say whether they want to become a political party or not. And of course, some other members were saying, maybe let's go that route. But I'm glad that others who fought so hard to say we don't have to become a political party, because then we would have been swallowed in the process, and maybe the BMF wouldn't have the impact that it had now. So at that time, then the ideology was saying the influence that we can have on any other governing party at the time is more important than us becoming a party and trying to contest for leadership. So that's why the BMF was able to distinguish itself. And I'm glad that the members were able to decide at the time to say that's what it's supposed to be. To say we are not going to affiliate to any political party, but we're going to support the government of the day. That's what we are going to do. We are going to make sure that this country is run properly and this country can be able to serve its own people. That's what the mindset of the BMF at the time, to say this country must be functional enough, its economy must grow, and its economy must be able to serve its own people.
Now, President, you've often spoken about the cathedral approach in the BMF. And that's a concept about you, The founders lay down the initial stones, but there isn't really a blueprint. The blueprint is developed over time, and it transitions and it adapts to the changing environment. And very often the founders never get to see the steeple of the cathedral, right? And when you speak about being in the crossfire, having been tempted to go one direction or the other, but always staying true to your true north, to the initial vision of the BMF, I think says to me that there's a very strong backbone in the organization. I mean, you've moved from a stage of 1994 and the early 2000s when Black BMF was extremely influential. And it has somehow been marginalized from the political spaces over years. But despite that, it's never compromised its integrity. How has it maintained that strong backbone?
Look, very great question, by the way. And the intro of your question is also what is important, especially when you touch in the cathedral thinking. Because the cathedral thinking, it is what informs the BMF. Now, if you remember the cathedral thinking that was formed in Spain there, when they were trying to build a church, and that church, even today, is not finished. We are talking about 1882. So we're talking about 140 years, but they're still building that church. And the people who started there, in fact, the person who started that cathedral church at the time, Anthony Godi, who was an architect, that guy, he died after 40 years been trying to develop this. But this church was still not finished. And his famous saying was to say, my client is not in a hurry. When people were pushing him, when are you going to finish this church? And he says, my client is not in a hurry. His client referring to God. To say, he's not in a hurry for me to finish this thing. But remember, the principle that we are learning there is to say, this movement or this building of this church is not about an individual. It's about the collective. And it's not only about the collective, which is very important, but it's about generations to come. So we build today for the generations to come. But we don't build today so we can finish. So we don't build so we can stay in the house. But we don't build so we can stay in the church. But we build with knowing that our generations will be the ones who also continue building. So you can just imagine 140-something years. Even today, the church is not finished. Fine, there were sayings of this going to be finished in 2026. But when you hear on the corridors, they are not done still. So what is important from that and the learnings that we are taking from the SDPMF is to say we are in a half a century. The people who started the BMF at that time, they never started the BMF with the mentality that they are going to finish whatever work that they are doing.
Now, you raised two really important issues, and I mean, we can have a conversation all day about that. But I'd like us to unpack two specific issues that you've raised. Post-1994, we are in a democracy, and BMF has continued with its culture of open dialogue and inclusion. And from what I've seen, its inclusive policy and its inclusive culture is something that it hopes will replicate into outside society. That's the first thing. The second thing is new leadership in building the different layers of the cathedral as we go forward. And I think the intersection, the nexus between these two concepts is the issue that you raised, which is moral, ethical, humane leadership. And we're seeing a deficit in our country. We're not really seeing the sort of leadership that takes the entire country forward. Black people and women and youth in particular remain some of the most marginalized groups around. And despite having this democracy for 32 years, they still don't have the space for the things that the BMF offers, which is inclusion and dialogue.
Yeah.
What are the main reasons why we've seen this systemic failure post 1994?
Look, I don't want us to be very hard on ourselves, and for a particular reason that Black people are very resilient. Black people are very competent, and Black people on its own, with our nature and our DNA, if you check the system of apartheid, what it has done to us, it was supposed to have finished us. But we are resilient like that. We can be able to stand anything else that comes to us. Hence, we don't have to be very hard on ourselves. And there were a lot of wins that we have made in the past 30-something years after democracy that we made, and a lot of strides that we have made, and also the contribution of the BMF in those wins that we have made. Now the issue is, I remember the BMF, which is something that is also should be recorded, is that post 1994, BMF contributed a lot when it comes to the Employment Equity Act and affirmative action. And at the time, BMF was close enough to the governing party, but also to government, to assist it with developing these policies. And part of it is that the Minister of Labour at the time, which is Tito Mboweni, was giving a space for the BMF to be able to contribute in terms of issues related to policies, but also the targets for industries as to what's supposed to happen. So the BMF was very close to the to the governing party to say, how can we run the country together? And those are the wins that the BMF had, because it also came to the level where the Black Economic Commission was also being formed, with the BMF being part of the people who facilitated the process, to a level that we were being able to become the midwives of this BBE. Now it's called BBE, which was BE at the time. So those are the wins that the BMF had over and above the other ones that the BMF has made. Now, with that is things that we should be able to be celebrating. That when I'm sitting down and I'm thinking, as the president now on the 50th celebration, is to say, we come from far, but there's a lot of wins that we can be able to celebrate and see. We can see the contribution of the BMF in terms of pushing the country to the right direction. Am I happy about the pace of transformation? No, not at all.
Yeah.
I think the pace can be accelerated, and there could be so many things that we can become very creative about, but stick to the principle of developing and so transforming our own people. And what I normally like to say is to say, until the economy looks like us, then it means the BMF is always going to be relevant. So hence I'm saying we don't have to be too hard on ourselves about the wins that we have already made in the country, and with the different presidents that have been there, or maybe leaders who have been leading the country moving forward. But I don't want to move away from your question, because your question is very crucial, to say, do you think the leaders that we have are good enough, and what are the issues that makes us not to achieve what we want to achieve at the pace that we should be able to achieve? I think we could do better. But of course, there are so many elements that has to do with it, which I'm going to just take one, which is very crucial for us. I think something that I also like to say is to say, Doc, if you go to any country and you start looking at all its own public servants, and when you look at the public servants and you see them becoming richer than business people, then you should know something is not right here.
Yeah.
And it's a systemic issue. I don't want to blame anyone. It's a systemic issue. It's an issue of the system, that the system somehow needs to change. There need to be lobby groups that are going to be able to put pressure enough that the system must change. Because the system allows that public servants can be richer. The system allows that public servants can now become business people and trading with the very same department. So we should be able to find a way on we strike the balance where we separate the two. Are you a businessman or are you a public servant? Because as soon as you separate the two, then it assists you in terms of how you want to run your country. But then if you've got a mixed masala, something that is going to be able to, somebody else is able to crisscross. Today I'm a businessman, but is also in a public domain. So whose interest is he going to look at first? Just a corporate governance issue, conflicts of interest and other things that has to do with it.
And I think you're raising a really important issue, President, and we've had a discussion about this previously, is Evans referred to this concept as embedded autonomy, where you keep your state very separate from the corporate sector, because if you don't, you move the state in the direction of becoming a predatory state, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that the state and business is so deeply intertwined is leading to an issue where both of these segments are so heavily monopolized, and there isn't the space for marginalized Black women and youth to occupy positions and get a piece of the economic pie, or even get senior level roles within government, because people don't want to surrender these roles. Once they're in those roles, they're not only seeing the power that they get from the state, they're also seeing the potential business opportunities they get from them.
Yeah.
Now, BMF has been doing a lot, as you mentioned, through the student chapter to create spaces for young people to engage, to empower themselves, to develop confidence, to grow and develop. Yeah. We've also been doing that through the Young Professionals organization. Speak to us about the role BMF plans to play in the future and how critical it is for it to have a direct link to government so that it can influence the policies relating to these issues.
Yeah, a very smart question as well that you just posing on us, because then it speaks to the aspect of where do we want to see the BMF after 50 years? Because the aspect is, it's good and well after half a century what we have achieved. And of course, we can see there's a lot of improvement that we need to have. But of course, what is important is then where are we going to see the BMF after 50 years? And do we have a vision that is very clear to say, do we know where we want to take the BMF? Now, that is very crucial in a sense that then you cannot be able to talk about the future if you don't touch young people and women. Because the future leaders are young people. So you cannot be able to run the BMF without thinking that there is young people that needs to become into the fold for them to be developed enough that they must be able to take over this thing go forward. Remember what we have mentioned about the cathedral thinking. It's you're planning for the future for a long haul. You're not planning for today, but you're planning that for the next coming 50 years, if not another 100 years, where will the BMF be? But you need to prepare it now. You need to prepare it by developing your own young people to have a certain mindset. When you're talking about a certain mindset, which is very crucial, I can only name one, the dependency mindset. That is very crucial for us. To say, if you're not going to dismantle the dependency mindset, and it's created by a whole lot of things. Might be created by poverty where we come from, might be created by the environment that we come from, the background that we come from that makes us to say, can I have handouts and quick fix?
Yeah.
Because we find we are living in days where people want quick fix. They want to enjoy the process. So we need to be able to dismantle that, but still having the mentality to develop young people, female, and as well as people with disability. We need to be able to include them into this economy, for them to be able to come into fold, because the future of the BMF depends on us, how we develop the young people, the female, and also the people with disability, so that they can be able to do the cathedral thinking, take over. Because the nice thing about the BMF is not about the leader. Of course, there's a leader at a certain time who makes their contribution as they are making it, but at this particular time, then they leave and another leader comes in. So it's an aspect of us being able to say, now for the next coming 50 years, the BMF needs to be able to develop its members, but especially the ones that I've just mentioned. Someone might be able to say, what happens with the issue of female leadership in the BMF? Because it's a very contentious issue. And it's not only BMF, for that matter, but it's in the country.
Now, Mr. President, we have reached our time, so we do need to close up the conversation, but I'd like you to give a personal message to our members, our Black Management Forum members, but also to the country as a whole. You've raised the issue about the need for youth development and youth employment, the need for inclusion of women in the economy, the need for the economy to be representative of us, meaning for it to be Black or more Black.
Yeah.
You mentioned people with disabilities. And my question to you is, we've seen a lot of people come through the BMF corridors, right?
Yeah.
It's had hundreds of thousands of members over 50 years that have risen to some fantastic heights within the state, in corporate, and all of these spaces. If I were to say to you that we need to call on that institutional memory, that knowledge, and all of that skill to mentor this future generation of builders, and I were to ask you, where are they? What would your answer be?
Look, a brilliant question. Brilliant question that you're asking, Dr. Siobhan. Those people are there. You know, with the role of presidency, all you do is to make sure you travel with corporate. There is not even a single corporate I went to and there's no BMF member. Or a former BMF member, for that matter. It shows how widespread we are as the BMF. Even at the level where now members are able to move to different like-minded organizations, like your APSIP, your Black Lawyers Association. Members still have the feel and as well as the footprint that they had in the BMF. So BMF, in actual sense, because we are the second largest organization after NAVCOC. So all these other professionals used to come to BMF until to a point where we said, let's focus on different industries, and that's when the APSIC were formed, the ABASAs were formed, and your Black Lawyers were formed. But what is important, I think, for us is to also say what you are mentioning, is to say we need to be able to have the mentorship that is very active, that is very voluntarily, for those ones who will also be able to benefit from the BMF.
Yes.
Because it's something else. But of course, there are those who are willing to do that. We have tried that. The issue is just to come up with ways and plans of how to be able to structure this thing so that we can be able to bring them on fold and mentor them. But of course, we also know that there are those who are simply saying they are closing the door behind them. So they are saying, look, we are fine, we are sorted, and they now have a say of saying, we got ourselves here. But we understand that if it wouldn't be about the BMF and the contribution of BMF, we wouldn't be where we are. So if we have that type of mentality, then it should be easy for someone else to say, I've made it in life and the BMF has contributed. I think I need to make an impact on the younger generations that is coming. And it should be something that comes as a second nature. It's not supposed to be something that we force you to do it. But of course, there's plans in the BMF for that to happen.
That's very exciting to hear.
Yeah.
In closing, Mr. President, if you could give us a message, 3 separate messages. I've got a big task for you. First, to your members, the architects of this cathedral of the future. What can they expect to see, and what is your call to action to them? Number 2, to broader Black society that are maybe a bit indifferent, a bit apathetic about the transformation agenda, and it is under attack. What's your call to action to them? And to the society as a whole, of every color, every gender, every religion. How can we achieve your ideal of collectivism, which is so necessary to move our country as a whole forward? What is your message to all these people?
Look, it's also a tough one, but it's achievable. Because what is important is especially for our members, is to say to our members, the mentality about BMF is not about an individual. And the way in which BMF is structured in a way that it forces all of us to become a collective. Because in the BMF, you can't do everything alone. And in the BMF, you are leading leaders. In the BMF, you lead intellectuals. In the BMF, you lead thought leaders. In the BMF, you lead people who want to ventilate their ideas. Now, the message is to say the BMF needs to go back to its drawing board. How it was formed, where dialogue was in the center of the BMF, where members used to talk about the issues that affect them and the issues that are affecting the country. And that's what the BMF is supposed to be. And it must happen in different provinces. Because when the founders found this, the BMF was only based in only few provinces. But until it was now said it must be decentralized by George Nogota to say it must go to provinces. Because there are different needs in provinces. So if you can just imagine if members in different branches and different provinces can be able to now have different dialogues and now have things that affect their location where they find themselves. And that will be able to make the BMF to be more viable enough. In fact, that will be able to make members to join BMF.
Yeah.
Because you'll be talking about issues that resonate with them. You'll be talking about the water shortages. Who wouldn't want to talk about that when you are affected? So people will be saying, but the angle in which we are going to use when we talk about it is we are solution driven because we are thought leaders. Is to say, no, as much as we're talking about this, we need to come up with ways on how to resolve it. And the president of the country, to be honest, is open enough for that. To say, I need thought leaders who can be able to bring me ideas, so we should be able to run and be able to help the country to achieve what it needs to achieve. So basically, that's what I would say to the members, to say, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's open up those dialogues. Let's talk about things that will be able to drive the economy of this country to make our country to be a better place and a safe place to stay in. But yes, what is also important, I think, for me, which lately that touches me, now when I'm getting into the issues of the country and all that, is the issues related to law and order. I know there are different elements to the economy to be driven in the country. But if law and order is not in the center of it, then we must just forget about it. So law and order is everything. Because if there's no law and order, then we are in the law of the jungle. We can eat each other. So people need to be governed by law, and someone must be able to implement the law and hold certain people accountable. So we cannot be able to that. Certain things, when they happen, they just happen and nothing happens. Because if there's no punishment, then it means there's no law. But there should be punitive measures that the law and somebody else to enforce this law, that we should be able to, and that on its own will attract as many investors as possible in the country, and it will make our economy to also be viable enough that it should be able to grow at the percentage that will be able to counter our population growth.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. President, and happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to another 50 beautiful, progressive, and transformative years.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shivan.
And thank you to our listeners and viewers at home.
Thank you.
Goodbye.